Thank you, and welcome to today's webinar on financial empowerment, brought to you by Project E3, the Educate, Empower, Employ Technical Assistance Center. My name is Terry Donovan. I'm one of the outreach program managers that's part of the Project E3 Technical Assistance Center. This particular partner is headquartered at the Stout Vocational Rehabilitation Institute at the University of Wisconsin at Stout. But again, we'll be talking about financial empowerment today. The usual acknowledgement and disclaimer, we'd like to particularly thank the Rehabilitation Services Administration for the grant which has funded our particular Technical Assistance Center and is making these webinars available. We also want to note that the ideas, opinions, and conclusions expressed are those of the presenters and do not represent recommendations, endorsements, or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. Well, today we're going to be talking about and using many of the resources that you can find at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. One of those is Your Money, Your Goals Toolkit, which is a comprehensive toolkit for financial planning and financial empowerment for individuals. On that website, which we have a link to that website at the end of our presentation, there's available training that they provide. There's an implementation guide for those that want to take the materials and do things on their own. Then there are some specialty areas, focus on people with disabilities that we'll be talking about today, focus on reentry for offenders, a focus on Native communities. You can read these. They also have some nice little booklets, particularly for youth, for anybody, but they seem to be particularly sort of attractive to youth who find them beneficial. One's called Behind on Bills, another is Debt Getting in Your Way. We'll be talking more about particularly the focus on people with disabilities and the Your Money, Your Goals toolkit through this presentation. Just to give you an idea, this is the cover of the one that we'll be talking about. It's a companion guide to empower the disability community, and it works in concert with the Your Money, Your Goals toolkit as well. I've mentioned a couple of times the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a federal agency, independent federal agency that was established to protect the consumers. It was established after the 2008 financial crisis. They do many things. One of the things that they do, they write and enforce rules for banks and other financial companies to ensure they operate fairly. One of their other key missions, which this relates to, they educate and empower consumers. They want to give consumers more informed choices so that they and all of us can reach our financial goals. And you can learn more about what they do at consumerfinance.gov, or if you can't remember that particular website, just type in the letters CFPB in your search engine and it will come up. Many wonderful resources there. Would encourage you to take a look at that, and they're all free. The resources are all free, and everything that we are using in this webcast that comes from the CFPB are free materials, and they also ship free. They have versions in Spanish. They did on an earlier version. I am not certain if they have it currently. They have a version in Braille and Spanish, and a variety of other accessible ways to make this available to as many individuals as possible. So what is financial empowerment? And again, how does it differ from many of the terms that have been out there for many years and are still out there, whether it's financial education, literacy, capacity, etc. For our presentation today, what we're going to take a look at is you have financial literacy, which you could say is the content and the specific information about making financial decisions and understanding various financial terms and financial instruments. But to get to financial empowerment, you need to couple that content knowledge with a skill and confidence to use that knowledge. Hence, you get financial empowerment. We think the materials that are included here, as well as the more expansive materials, again, as I've noted in the materials provided by the CFPB, that the financial literacy or the content coupled with raising the skill and confidence of individuals increases the likelihood that they will have some financial empowerment and will feel more comfortable and more at ease in issues of finance, money, savings, and spending. So with money, as we all know, there are a variety of things that come up. There's always going to be values, there's always going to be choices, and there's issues of rights, particularly rights with persons with disabilities. Keep in mind, our values about our money come from life experiences, our culture, family, peers, what we see on media, online, digital, television, may even hear on the radio. You don't want to judge how people spend and how they may value, how they make choices, and even some of their rights. The intent and what this promotes is we want to give people tools to make decisions and for people to understand the possible results of those decisions. And so, yes, you need a good background. Yes, you need to make a decision. It's also beneficial to understand the repercussions of certain types of decisions. If I spend this amount of money, this may happen. If I save this amount of money, this is a possible result, and those types of things. And again, people with disabilities, as we all know, have the right to make choices on how their money is used, and they also have the right to take risks. We all take risks with our money to one degree or another. Some may take higher risk, some may take lower risk. But whether we invest, whether we find donations, whether we, it's a low risk, but depending on what you plan to do with your funds, there are certain levels of risk. A person with disability, the same as an individual with non-disability, has a right both to make choices and a right to take risks. And even if an individual has, let's say, a payer for their financial situation, or a guardian, or an individual of that nature, even individuals with persons with disabilities in those situations should still be consulted and involved as much as possible in the process. And we'll talk at the end of this about potential issues of financial exploitation that can occur with individuals with disabilities. Usually won't happen if they are being consulted and involved in the process. So one of the pieces is starting the money conversation. We won't go through all these questions. Talking about money, and again, we talked earlier about values around money and culture and those kinds of things. Many, both cultures, families, individuals, the idea of talking about money is not a topic that people often like to talk about, or may not have been talked about in the house, or there may not have been conversations about spending. There may not have been conversations about saving for a variety of reasons. So this worksheet that you can copy, but is also in the materials that you can get from the CFPB, some questions that you can have with an individual when you sit down with them, rather than saying, like, what do you think about spending and saving? A way to begin having that conversation about money with an individual. And as we've said, do you have a disability you're comfortable disclosing? Do you have goals? We'll talk a little bit, we'll talk in a bit about goals around spending and saving. Are you at risk of losing something because of not able to make payments? Issues of transportation. Do you have a reliable source of income? And you may already know the questions, you may already know the answers to these questions, but it's a good way to begin that conversation, to have a person begin to open up and feel comfortable talking about money and talking about what they plan to do with it, what they would like to do with it, what they see down the road for themselves. And as I noted, one of the big issues for all of us, and particularly for not particularly, for all of us, including individuals with disabilities, it's setting goals and saving for purchases. Again, having a goal, essential part of achieving self-sufficiency, a goal around income and spending. They can help you plan how you're going to use your cash, how you're going to use your money. And as you have a goal, that often, particularly a financial goal, that helps you think, okay, how do I get there? Well, I'm making X amount of money, and I have perhaps X amount of expenses, but I need to save for that purchase. And so how do I adjust what I'm doing? And we've noted there examples of different kinds of goals, starting with assistive devices and medical expenses to things like computer games and a cell phone. So many things that you can have a goal for, many things that you can save for. One of the pieces about setting a savings goal, and it's been around for a number of years, and many of you might be familiar with it, are the issues of SMART goals. And for purposes of an example of how a SMART goal might look, you may have a client that is interested in buying a license to a video game. And breaking that down, the specific aspect of the goal may be, I want a multiplayer game called Conquer the Universe. Now, measurable often implies, how will I know that it occurred? Not implies, is how will I know that it happened? And in this case, you're going to purchase a license for the multiplayer game. And the purchase would be your measurable piece. Was it purchased? Was it not purchased? But you're telling yourself that I want to purchase it, and that's how I'm going to measure it. And in a way, that will let me know that I've made that part of the goal. So I have the specific, I have the measurable, able to be reached. For many of you that have been in goal setting, there often was a piece, well, let's set a crazy out there type of goal that we're never going to reach, but it helps us strive for it. Some of the more recent research and looking at a variety of things is looking at at least what are goals that are reachable. So in this case, I added a purchase of $15 a month license, and some of this is, again, going back to the money conversation with the client. And we'll, as we talk more about looking at their income and their expenses, what do you think you could afford, or what is a goal that you want in terms of being able to save for it, earn additional funds? In this case, arrived at, I believe, $15 a month is a reasonable goal that I could reach and sustain in order to maintain my license. Relevant to me, I need a game that includes updates. So that's sort of a relevant aspect. And then the time frame. In this case, the individual is saying, by 6 months from today, I want to be able to purchase this $15 a month license. Time frame helps you put it all into context, helps you divide it up into smaller increments, and also helps you focus on saving the amount and spending the amount of time to get there. And it also understands, how are you getting there? At 2 months, you can say, how are we doing on getting there? At 4 months, both individual, or if you're working with someone, you'd pick 6 months, we're halfway there. Are you halfway to saving the amount of money, or earning the amount of money, or creating the amount of money that you will need for a $15 a month license? So those would be a SMART goal. Again, one way to save for goals are things called ABLE accounts that many of you might be familiar with already. They've been around for about 3 to 4 years. An excellent way to save money for individuals with disabilities. I've outlined a couple of the key points. We'll talk about 2 of these later on. Again, savings and ABLE accounts, they don't affect your eligibility for SSI, Supplemental Security Income, or for Medicaid and other federal means-tested benefits. Probably one of the biggest benefits of an ABLE account. You can contribute up to $15,000. You get to choose how it's invested. You can invest 100% into stocks. You could put 100% into a money market account, some mix of a variety of different kinds of things. You choose how it's invested. As with many of these kinds of plans that are tax exempt, there are qualified disability expenses about which you can use your ABLE savings, and we'll talk a little bit about that. As well as, if you are interested in beginning an ABLE account, each state has its own ABLE account and someone who's administering your ABLE program. It's not a national program. It was enabled with national legislation, but each individual state has an ABLE program. There are some similarities in all of them, but there are some differences. So check in your individual state. And there are eligibility criteria that we'll talk about. But if you are interested in at least exploring an ABLE account, if you go to www.ablenrc.org, that's the National Center for ABLE Accounts, you can find your state contact and learn more about the particular rules for your state with ABLE accounts. But again, a very nice way to set aside funds for really for any size expense, and we'll talk about the eligible ones, up to a maximum of $15,000. They also have sort of lifetime maximums that generally it's approximately $300,000, but you will need to check with your individual state. How are you eligible for an ABLE account? you have to have been if you have to be eligible for SSI based on your disability or blindness that began before age 26. And that's probably the key piece to remember. Now, if you are 45, you can start an ABLE account if, in fact, your disability began before age 26. If you're younger than 26, less of an issue, you can start at that point as well. But really, the key piece for eligibility is when was your disability determined, disability or blindness determined? Was it before age 66? And again, eligible for SSI based on your disability. And it gives you a number of examples there and that type of thing. So again, the key thing to think about, the way the legislation was set up is to qualify for an ABLE account, your disability and blindness needed to begin before you were 26. And again, there can be more when you go to the national center that I talked about or your individual state, they can give you more specifics about eligibility. We're just covering some of it here. What are some of the qualified disability expenses? We talked about that initially when I showed that first slide. ABLE savings funds can be used, and again, the official term, qualified disability expenses. And these may include, and you can look at this whole list here. It's actually quite extensive and expansive in terms of what you can use it for. Something to keep in mind if you decide to go this route, and your state administrator will talk about it and would be in the materials, that if you use a ABLE account to pay for something that is determined to not be one of the qualified disability expenses, that can be considered income, actually it can be considered taxable income when you withdraw it. So it's important if you open an ABLE account to ensure that the expenses that you pay are fit within one of these qualified disability expense categories. And again, you can withdraw at any time. Again, double check with your state, but generally it's meant as a savings account, but when you get to a certain point, maybe you have a healthcare expense, or you need an assistive technology device, or you have found some reliable transportation and you want to be able to start paying for it, you can start using your ABLE account for those types of things. And there'll be paperwork involved, etc. So we've been talking about savings, we've been talking about goals. Well, how do we get to those savings goals? How do we get the income and to a certain degree the benefits in order to get to our savings goals? So you need to understand the amounts and timing of your financial resources, income from work and or benefits. When does it come? How much is it? And those types of things. So you want to start thinking about tracking your income or your financial report. You don't have to do it all the time. Sometimes, and how you do it is up to you. You might look at it for a couple of months to get an idea of what it looks like. You might just look at it for 1 month. But again, the idea is to start, and particularly if you're working with a client, to get them to start getting them in the habit of tracking their income, of understanding when it comes in, how much is it, how does it get affected, are there any deductions from it, what are those, and that type of thing, so they begin to understand the income side of what they're getting. So here's a simple sheet. You can use anything. This one's contained in the materials on tracking your income and benefits. And in this case, the individual has a job. They make $300 a week, so they're getting $1,200 a month in income from their job, and they're getting $225.50 in disability benefits from SSI. And we'll talk specifically about how your SSI is affected when you go to work. So a worksheet to take a look at income and benefits to help an individual begin to understand where their income is coming from and how much they have coming in. And again, some lines for additional pieces to take a look at. And again, one of the pieces that's out there, working and benefits. We'll talk about the myth and reality. We'll spend a little bit of time here. The myth is, and we hear it constantly, and I'm sure as individuals that work with persons with disabilities, you often hear, I can't go to work, I'm going to lose all my SSI, or I'm going to lose all my SSDI. It's all going to go away once I start working. So that is the myth, that actually your earnings offset and reduce benefits but they rarely go away. They may go away, but there's a substantial amount of money you would need to make before they would go away completely. Because in reality, working while receiving benefits will lead you to a higher income than just receiving benefits. And you do want to talk with a work incentive benefit specialist if you have some questions about this. And you'll see from the example that we'll run through that you could work with a client. But I mean, there will be cases where working, probably very few hours at a very low wage may not be beneficial in terms of their benefits. But generally speaking, an individual who wants a higher income, as we back it up, they have a goal. They need to make some savings to make those goals. They begin to understand their income, and they're saying, I need more money to achieve my goal, to get the license for the video game that I want. I think I need some more income. But on the issue of first, you want to talk with a work incentive benefit specialist. But if you have not concerns, but if you're interested in a wide variety of information about working and benefits, Project E3 sponsored a 6-part series by Lucy Miller on working and benefits, and it's at that particular site. They're archived, they're recorded, they're excellent background in all areas of working and benefits. So one way to take a look at this is there's an SSI estimator in these materials. It's actually in the Focus on Disability booklet that accompanies the Your Money, Your Goals. They can understand how their earnings will affect their SSI benefit. First, for what people need to understand is when they earn money for a job, they keep the first 85 of their pay without any impact on SSI. And then for every dollar they earn, their SSI drops by 50%. So as you can see just in that second bullet, it doesn't all go away automatically. I don't start earning money and my SSI stops 100%. I never see another dime. It's a progressive reduction based on as you grow your income from working. Yes, your SSI will progressively change, but it does not totally go away right away. It just doesn't happen. In most cases, the more a person works, the more they make overall, even with a declining SSI. So again, I understand the situation that's out there. I understand many of you probably, as they say, have gotten blue in the face trying to explain to individuals that, in fact, SSI does not go away 100%, that it progressively declines as you earn more money. So the exercise we'll go through and the tool that's been in the materials from the CFPB, we think, based on some other training that we've done with individuals, we think might be helpful in that conversation, or at least we hope it will. So here's an example, 2 individuals, amount you earn from work. So one individual is making $15 an hour for 10 hours a week, and the other individual is $15 an hour for 20 hours a week. And I'm not sure, depending on the state you're in, but $15 an hour nationally seems like a fairly average starting wage in many types of jobs for individuals. Some might be a little bit less, some might be more. So we have 585 and 1200. The first 85, you subtract off the first 85 that you get to keep. So what's the income that's going to affect your SSI? $500 in the first example, $1,115 in the second. You divide that amount in half. Remember, for each dollar, it's a 50-cent reduction. So for each dollar of income that you receive, your SSI goes down by half of that. So you earn $1, it goes down by 50 cents. So in this case, I'm earning $500, so half of that will be taken from my SSI. So in the first case, $250 would be deducted. In the second case, $557.50 would be taken from their SSI. Okay. So at this point, 783 is the amount of SSI that individuals are getting, or as of 2019. So that goes at the top there in line F. So you subtract the amount taken from SSI from the amount you're currently getting. So first column, you take away the 250, that leaves you with 533 of SSI that you're receiving. Second column, pretty substantial hit, some may say. You're down to $225.50 of of what you'll be receiving from SSI. But then you look at, okay, how much am I earning from work? You fill in those numbers. You add the new amount of SSI, so I'm adding that in, the 533, the 225.50. So now what's my monthly take home? I'm working and I'm still receiving, although a reduced amount of SSI. First column, I'm making 1,118. Second column, I'm making 1,425 and 50 cents. That last part is the part that we believe could be beneficial in showing that to a client, and you may need to adjust, but for purposes of this example, the individual in column one, in final terms, they're making $335 more a month by working than if they only were on SSI. Second column, they're making $642 and some change more than they would have made if they only collected their SSI benefit. So we have found this chart to be, at least for individuals and counselors that we have talked to and have done this training with, they particularly like this chart. We haven't gotten back to all of them about if clients magically said, well, obviously I need to go to work. But they felt at least that this could be particularly beneficial both for the client and the client's parents or the client's guardians, or even the client's friends who might be telling them, no, you don't want to go to work, you don't want to go to work, you're going to lose all your SSI. This kind of example, seeing it proverbially in black and white, many people have thought, and we seem to think, a visual to accompany the conversation is a real plus and may be enough for a number of individuals, not everybody, to say, this actually starts to make some sense. And again, backing up, if you start having that conversation, the money conversation, do you have financial goals? Are there things you want to do? Are there things you'd like to save for that you're not able to do now? And then you walk through this worksheet. It may be beneficial in terms of helping people understand that going to work is a good thing, can be a good thing for them financially, besides the social good that comes from working. So we have blanks included in the PowerPoint, which is included in the chat section of where you can download this. And again, it's also in the CFPB materials. So that's a blank. So the next piece is you've got some income. Ideally, you've gone to work, so you have a little bit more income. You want to understand where your cash is going. How are you spending your money? Same as what we talked about with the income. Track your spending day, a couple weeks or a month. Begin to understand where your money is going. And again, it can help you make changes about how to spend your money or not spend your money. You want to increase your savings down the line, and how they use it. I'll have an example here. Doesn't matter. Some people may have a computer program they want to use. They may have something on their cell phone, paper and pencil. Whatever it is. The point is that they start keeping track of where their money is coming from and when it comes in, because that can make a difference as well. So if we look at the spending tracker, these are their expenses, and this is when they occur by week. So you have the first week, pretty large chunk of cash that's coming in, that's going out that first week, not so much in weeks 2, 3, a little bit more in week 4, and then week 5 if there's 5 weeks in the month, partial week and that type of thing. But this does two things. One is it tells people where their money is going. It also tells them when it is going and when payments come due. And in case people don't understand it, many things do come through the first of the month. And so how do you need to be ready for that? In many cases, government payments and other things come at the first of the month. But depending, if you're only paid once a month, you may need to understand, I can't, even though I might be good in week 1, I can't spend everything because I still have weeks 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 before I get my next monthly paycheck, or bi-weekly. But anyway, this is the usual piece of, this is where for any given, and again, you can do it for a day. Probably better to do it for a week or two for individuals to get an idea of how they're spending and where they're spending their money. And again, there's a blank available if you'd like to take a look at that. Another piece, and it may vary depending, some clients, particularly if they're not working yet, part of this is this training, and for you and for us to explain it, is giving you additional tools to, one, help people understand sort of the whole financial piece that they may not be totally aware about, as well as helping them think about going to work, so they may or may not be working, and they may or may not have incurred debt. There's a whole series of possibilities here. Credit card debt might be one of the pieces that are people that clients may have more of than others. But eventually, I mean, getting in the habit of understanding where their debt is and having this chart, if people are beginning to earn more money, if they're beginning to save, and if they're generally paying with cash, which is actually these days probably a very good thing, but occasionally it can be beneficial to have a credit card, or you may end up with some medical debt, or you may have some past due fees or fines from when you were in school, or who knows. So again, a chart for people to begin understanding their debt, both what's your monthly payment, when's the due date, and this can also be worked into your spending tracker. Interest rate may be beneficial just for people to understand what that's costing. But probably one of the more important pieces, all this ties together, and if you were having a conversation, is what's the payoff date or goal? And it kind of goes to the SMART goal idea, the time limited. When do you want to pay this off? When's a reasonable amount of time to pay it off? When do you want to be debt free? So again, another chart for those of you that may have clients or consumers that have debt and may or may not understand what the debt is, or why, if they're only paying the minimum, why it doesn't seem to be going down very much versus if they're able to pay more, how it could go by a little bit quicker, and those kind of conversations. So the other is to put together something like a monthly budget, and this is just combining, my video is covering the lower piece, but this again is on a sheet. You can pull together the income sheet that we talked about. You pull together the spending tracker that we talked about. So you start, and they can say, okay, I begin to understand this is my income and this is how all my money is being spent. And what you probably couldn't see, but you begin to see, okay, this is my total income. For this particular example, the individual is making $1,425 a month. And at this point, their spending is $1,370. And so they have an extra $55, which ideally should go into savings, or they could spend it. But again, walking through this whole series of steps, going back to the beginning of, say, their SMART goal of, do you have a goal for something that you want? And it may be even, a $50 item that they want. Going through this whole sequence, particularly if they're working, but even if they're still just receiving benefits, understanding where their money is coming from and where their money is going, and then what's left over at the other end. This conceivably could be a negative number after they sit down and actually do everything and do it, say, month to month, whereas they thought, oh, I'm doing fine, but the way the months and the payments were overlapping, they may have thought they were doing just fine, when in fact they might have been progressively running up, not running up, but, well, sort of running up a deficit to a degree, and that may have been reflected if they had some kind of debt that they were trying to pay off and found that they were paying less and less of the debt because of other things. So this whole piece, it gets to the point of probably minimally you want that amount, you want zero. Ideally, you want to look at either, do I increase my income or decrease my spending so that I can have additional funds to save or spend on pieces that are one of the goals that I want. Credit history. Talk real quick about credit history. Why do I need a good credit history? And clients may wonder, particularly if they're maybe only getting benefits and are all on cash. But you'd like to believe eventually, if they do get a job, begin to start working, begin to gather cash, and begin to get credit either through a credit card or perhaps a small loan for school or something along those lines. A good conversation to have, even though someone may not have credit at this point, because credit histories are becoming more and more important, are being used more and more frequently by more and different kinds of entities. In the past, it was often just getting a loan at a bank, and was, how's your credit history? Then it started to get expanded, obviously, to credit cards and things of that nature. Now, your employer may check your credit history while you're in the process of applying for a job. Apartments have now started to use, and probably maybe did, but again, if you want to get into an apartment, they may see, because they're concerned whether or not you'll pay the rent, they may look at your credit history. Insurance, utilities, even cell phones. Depending on the quality of your credit history, it may or may not give you a better deal, so to speak, when you apply for certain types of things like utilities. Utilities may not require a huge down payment if they see that you have a good credit history and you pay your bills on time. And in some cases, a security clearance for a job, say a military position, if you are applying for a position that perhaps has sensitive information, they may want to know that you have good, solid financial credentials so you aren't susceptible to somebody offering you money to get out of debt in exchange for classified information or something along those lines. And that's the military. Could even be for a company. They may want to offer you something to get certain information from the company that isn't supposed to be shared with competitors. So more and more people are using credit history. So something to keep in mind as you're looking at getting a job, keeping a job, and moving up in the job. And you can get your credit, if in fact you do have some debt, or you have a credit card, or you have credit of some form, you can get a report. Here's a place you can go. You can get it free, I believe it's once a year, as noted there. Order it from home or order it at a place where you have a secure computer, because it's going to ask for things like social security numbers and other key information. When you get it, here's a piece of information that you should take a look at. There often are mistakes on credit reports that may have an impact on, as we talked about, applying for a job, getting an apartment, getting a cell phone, maybe even getting a job. So you want to make sure that the information on the credit report is correct, and you can correct it. But here's a checklist of the different things particularly you should look at, because those are often the key elements when they come up with a score. If you have seen ads on TV and other places, many of you are familiar, but they'll talk about, and they'll show the little dial that says 650, 350, 780. The higher your score is, the better your credit history. And these are clearly some of the elements that go into that. And so it's important that that information is correct. The last piece we'll talk about, the risks for persons with disability around financial exploitation. And both for you on this call and webinar who might be working with individuals with disabilities, and if there are individuals on this call that have a disability, these are some of that have been identified as sort of the circumstances or conditions that may make a person with a disability at a higher risk. And you can read through this list. But if you have regular income, particularly assets, we may be too trusting and polite. That's probably true for all of us, something to keep in mind. But if you tend to be lonely and socially isolated because of your disability or inability, or there may not be sufficient transportation for you to get out and around, someone may present themselves as a good friend or offering you something when in fact their desire is to financially exploit you. I'm not saying that's everybody, but things to keep in mind. There's a variety of things. So look through those, keep those in mind when you're thinking about if you have clients that you're wondering, is there a possibility, or what is the risk? Whether it is or isn't going on, that may not be your job to find that out specifically, but at least you can get an idea perhaps of the risk. How many of these sort of risk factors may occur in the situation that you're with that may help at least pay a little bit more attention to what's going on. Probably, you would like to say mostly it's the regular income and accumulated assets, but I would guess that there are cases of financial exploitation for individuals that are only receiving SSI or only receiving a little bit of SSI and some SSDI. So things to keep in mind. These last couple of slides, similar to when we started with starting the money conversation, this is a way for either you as a counselor or family member or guardian, or even with the individual, to go through a list of questions or an observation that might start raising either a suspicion or something you actually saw happen. Things like frequent checks are made out to cash from the individual's account. That could be substitute frequent ATM withdrawals for cash from the individual's account. Changes to an individual's will, unusual information in a tax return. Things a caregiver's name is added to accounts of the individual. So it's important to always review the documents that come back from the bank or the financial institution to make sure that there haven't been changes made in who can sign, who can authorize, who's listed on the account, that type of thing. So other situations that also arise that can leave an individual susceptible to exploitation can be a change in their environment that you may notice, bills going unpaid or overdue when someone else is supposed to be paying them. The living conditions, you may visit an individual, find that the apartment or the kitchen is not as clean as you would expect it to be. And particularly personal belongings are going missing, particularly credit cards or important papers, identification documents. And then there's the unusual behavior that you may observe in the individual, the vulnerable individual particularly. Seem to be getting them isolated. Caregivers or family members seem to be isolating the individual who used to be more outgoing, would get out periodically. That wasn't happening anymore. You can read through all of these and other. Suddenly the individual doesn't know how much income they're receiving, and you're unable to get a clear picture or a clear statement from the caregiver or the fiduciary individual who's looking after the money. Expensive or gifts, that could be a particular, it doesn't necessarily mean there's something unusual going on, but if a caregiver is getting particularly expensive or more than you would expect a caregiver to receive in terms of a gift from the individual. And perhaps one of the real red flags is if a live-in caregiver refuses to leave the individual alone even while you're there and even while they may be requested to leave. So things to keep in mind. Again, it's a checklist. You can talk suspected, you might actually observed it, or even reported. Most states, even if you are not a mandatory reporter around vulnerable adult issues, you may want to note that you would like to pass that on. Again, just, and there could be many others, but just a way to think about exploitation that may be occurring, financial exploitation that could be going on with an individual. Well, we are coming to the end of our time together. I wanted to give you this information about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. As we've already talked about, it's an independent federal agency established to protect consumers. It grew out of the financial crisis of 2008. A couple of websites within that. Consumerfinance.gov is the overall site. You can always just go there, their homepage, and navigate from there. If you'd like, the consumerfinance.gov, Your Money, Your Goals, takes you to a site that has all the different materials connected to the Your Money, Your Goals workbook and toolkit. All of it you can download for free. There are no copyrights. You can share it with anybody you'd like. You can also request copies to be mailed to you as well. They ship free of charge. These days, with all of the shipping that's going on, there might be a slight delay. But my recollection is we have ordered materials from them somewhere in the 1 to 2 week range. The other is the site for empowerment. Gives you some additional information, thoughts, and ideas and approaches for helping individuals reach the financial empowerment stage. If you remember our equation at the beginning, it's both having the information and then having the assertiveness and the skills about how you will use that information, which leads to financial empowerment. So a couple of websites for you to find additional information as well as additional materials that you would like to have for your particular clients or the situation that you're in. So if you would like to catch up with either myself or Beth Gertner, this is our contact information. You haven't heard from Beth yet. She will be helping me with the question and answer session that immediately follows this. Beth has a lot of experience with financial empowerment, teaching and training around financial empowerment. She's comfortable with the materials that we've used here today. She's a great resource, and you can reach out to me, myself as well. We can help you answer questions. If you'd like, we'd have to talk about it, but it's conceivable we could do some virtual presentations to additional staff if that's something you have an interest in. We can talk through all the different possibilities. So please connect with either myself or Beth if you have any questions about the materials we've done today. And one final piece, our intent here was not to make you financial planners, skilled financial planners. The intent was to introduce you to some information, everyday information that you could use with your client. We also realized that you may not use every piece that we talked about in here, and that's fine. Some individuals may need help with putting their budgets together. Some may need help understanding where their income is coming from. Others may need to understand what will happen to their SSI if they go back to work. We're not expecting actually that all consumers would be interested in all the material we talked about today, and there's even more material in the Your Money, Your Goals toolkit. We just wanted to introduce you to some of the more regularly used instruments and issues that arise around finances, and give you some tools so that you feel more comfortable bringing up issues of finances and money with your clients, and ways how that can be done that the client is willing to talk about their finances and their financial goals and savings. So thanks very much for your attendance. We really appreciate you coming to our E3 webinars. We will take a couple of minutes and then we will move into the question and answer session. So thanks again. We really appreciate it. Please come to all of our webinars. There's a number of good webinars coming up in the coming weeks, and we will enjoy seeing you there as well. Thank you.